Hello and welcome back to the Americano Show. I'm delighted to be joined today by Candace Owens, the now very famous host of the Candace Owens Show, who is making quite a lot of noise in the media because she is being sued or threatened with legal action by the Macrons, Emmanuel and Brigitte Macron, the President and First Lady of France, because, Candace, you believe that Brigitte Macron is a man. Why do you think the Macrons are choosing to sue you?
Because they were trying to stop the story. I think it was an effective PR strategy. They had been suing and harassing the journalists that had initially brought the story forth to the French public for years. And then they lost their defamation suit against the two journalists, Amandine Roy and Natasha Ray. And that was pretty explosive news. So I think that they then filed suit against me, knowing that it would drive potentially the most media traffic, to kind of say, oh, no, but it still isn't true at all. I know we lost this defamation case on our home turf, but we're now going to try it in America just to kind of signal to the press that they're not lying.
But I mean, if you wanted the story to go away, and knowing a little bit about you, as they probably do by now, certainly her legal team will, this is not a very sensible strategy for making the story go away if they're worried that it's true and they want it to be covered up.
Yeah, actually, if you look at the history of them as a couple, they haven't been very good at PR. And I think that the reason that is I'm not quite sure they understand the differences, the nuances between America and France, the United States and France. Where they live, they can and they have sued journalists for cyberbullying. I mean, really petty things to say you're not allowed to do this in France. It's what, 60 million, a population of 60 million people. So I do actually think they also don't even understand the media podcasting world. I do think it was poor advice. I think their advisors made the wrong decision. And we saw this even recently, the disaster of their PR when Brigitte was caught assaulting Macron on the plane. I mean, they lied. They forcefully lied. And then they essentially disappeared the story the very next day from the French press. So they're used to having that kind of power.
It's that clip that makes me think you're wrong, because I'm pretty sure she punches like a girl.
Well,
Men
it
don't
was a
hit
bit
like
of a
that.
face. It's an incredible moment. It really is an incredible moment. A lot that's happening there. Even Emmanuel's ability to sort of instantly find his composure and start smiling as soon as he recognizes the cameras are on them. But the Elysee Palace communicated immediately, because they didn't think that the cameras had caught it, that it was actually Russian disinformation. So they lie a lot to the public. There's a long history of them lying as a couple. I'm not sure what else could have why they would have sued on American turf. It's unprecedented for a sitting president of a country to do this. So it has to just be, I mean, genuinely, it has to just be guided by stupidity.
Yes. I mean, the sort of the origin conspiracy of this conspiracy, and I'm not meaning to dismiss your what you believe
No, you're
about it,
fine.
but the origin conspiracy is the sheer oddness of the age gap between Emmanuel Macron and his wife, and the fact that they met when Macron was a very, very young man, and it feels wrong and off. Is that's how you first became sort of suspicious about their relationship?
Actually, the way that I became suspicious, I wasn't suspicious at all. I mean, it's kind of a tough climb. If somebody says the first lady of this country is a man, you would have to produce a lot of evidence to get me on that side. Don't forget, I live in the United States. They were saying that about Michelle Obama. I never bid on that whatsoever, nor did Michelle Obama ever even respond to the claims. This story was interesting. What actually caught my attention was the Daily Mail ran a headline, and Emmanuel Macron was on camera saying it's not true, and kind of freaking out about these rumors and saying how hurtful they were. And I thought that was odd. I said, what could possibly be going on in France that the president is having to lower himself to respond to such a ridiculous rumor? And when I was reading this article, I was sort of interested in the dog that wasn't barking, which is that the Daily Mail didn't do a good job of instantly debunking it. Obviously, tons of photos could debunk this, her with her children pregnant. And I thought, that's weird. And I was then brought to a website which explained what was happening. And I instantly knew that there was something here. And for those who have not watched the series that I put forth for Becoming Brigitte, along with those journalists in France, what actually happened that got this story started, it was not a far right conspiracy. It wasn't a deep internet web conspiracy. It was actually journalists that were on the left who loved Brigitte Macron and wanted to celebrate her by doing their due diligence and telling the story of Brigitte Macron. These were feminists, Condé Nast writers, mainstream writers, as well as a woman who's very well known. I'm blanking on her name at the moment, for her documentaries. She focuses on doing Holocaust documentaries in France, mainstream documentaries for their government channel. And they all fell down a hole. They felt that they were being threatened by the Elysee Palace. They were asking basic questions, asking for pictures, and feeling like they had done something wrong. And they were essentially being told that the only person that could get them what they were looking for was a woman named Mimi Marchand, who at that moment was running communications for the Macron couple. Mimi Marchand has since been charged with forging documents, so it's not helping. It's certainly not helping matters. And they've since distanced from her, but she has a history of being a gangster and forging documents. So it was very organic how this story took off in France. People just trying to figure out, like, hey, can we get some photos of you? There's kind of 30 years of your life that seems to be missing.
Yes. I mean, it is definitely strange that nobody seems to be able to find a lot of evidence about Brigitte Macron's upbringing.
Yeah.
But I mean, what occurs to me, I've watched your series. I know the journalist you speak to, Xavier Broussard, is it? Broussard? He uses a facial recognition app to say that these images of Brigitte Macron's brother must be her. There's a sort of 80% likelihood. That strikes me as not necessarily reliable. And also the fact that, siblings can look very, very alike. So the fact that Brigitte Macron's brother looks a lot like her is quite not that surprising, is it?
No, it's not surprising at all. And you're correct. This is not a 100% technology. Yes, it is the technology that is used by the World Economic Forum. It's used in China, and it has a lot of accuracy. But there, of course, is room for error if you're using a technology. That's really kind of when you get to the end of the story, right? Truly, what's more compelling is that this brother of hers is missing, like the person that everyone is saying that she transitioned from, as well as the efforts that Xavier Broussard went through to get documents pertaining to this brother. He has a military record, despite that is supposed to be public. They're refusing to release that. It's a very simple thing. And that's why I always say, you don't need to get into the specifics of whether or not the facial recognition software is accurate or if siblings could look alike. I know siblings that look like twins, to be honest. But all of the other stuff, before you even arrive at that, of him just trying to do the due diligence at the end, is where's your brother? I mean, at this point, you would have to have a terrible relationship with your brother if you wouldn't just come out before you had to sue anyone and say, hi, it's me. I'm Jean-Michel Trugno. I love my sister very much. I'm a private person, but this is getting ridiculous. Or even her children, right? Her children could release photos of them being raised by her growing up. Maybe I don't care how angry you are at your parents. At a certain level, you'd go, guys, this is getting ridiculous. Here's me and my mom. And what's even interesting is the one daughter that is the only one that speaks out in Brigitte's defense does post photos of her father growing up. This recent Father's Day, she posted a trove of photos on Instagram of her father raising her, but she won't just produce photos of Brigitte, like, holding your child's hand, first bike ride, whatever it is. And so it's just gotten so remarkably strange because they've tried to present this as if we created the series and we're demanding the blood of Brigitte Macron. We're just like, hey, 30 years of your life is missing. It's getting a little uncomfortable with how many people in your orbit have been arrested for pedophilia. You've lied, objective lies that you told the press at the beginning of your relationship. Don't forget when he first ran for president, the public told, the media told a story that he was 17. Now we've got them down to 15. And the truth is that he was actually 14 when he was in that play where she says she saw him perform. But it's not helping the media story that they lied from the very beginning regarding this couple and tried to present it as if Brigitte was this really irresistible, sexy teacher when they actually got evidence of what she looked like when she was teaching Macron. She looks homely. She I don't know. It's definitely not a very attractive teacher that was wearing skirts. It looks like a male that's in the middle of a transition, to be honest with you.
Well, yes, and I've listened to what Xavier and you said about that, and I mean, it does sound a bit like Xavier was sort of just angry at the media for the way that they manicured her image, but that's what happens with powerful and important people. Their images are always being manicured, and often they manicure themselves.
Which is totally fine, but I think lying about the age, where there's one lie, I always say, where there's one lie, there's many. When you have to lie about something, it's not because you're like, well, it's just this one thing we need to lie about. It's every piece of the Brigitte Macron story that has required so many lies. And yeah, they did that perhaps because they didn't want people to realize that something really strange happened at that school. And it doesn't help, by the way, that when Emmanuel Macron entered office, they got to work trying to lower the age of consent to 13. Okay. That's not the age of sexual consent to 13. It doesn't help, of course, that Emmanuel Macron's mother worked in her career assisting transgendered people in getting identities. That none of this stuff helps the story that the person that's dressing Brigitte Macron that works with LVMH and Louis Vuitton specializes in androgynous dressing trans people and getting models that are trans. There's so many other elements that are just peculiar. And again, we did, and so I want people to also know this, we did not publish even the first episode of this series. We were in touch with Brigitte's team. They got in touch with us before we published the first episode. And we said, look, we're not interested in spreading conspiracies, right? Answer these basic questions. We're not asking you for blood or anything. Could you produce some photos of your living for 30 years? We could actually help you debunk this pesky conspiracy theories. We have a big platform. Could you answer yes or no? Did you live as Jean-Michel Trogneau? Could you answer yes or no? Have you ever lived as a person named Veronique? And they forcefully declined to answer any of those questions. And so that, again, is not the story you're trying to tell, is that this series hurt you, but you had within your power the ability to stop this series by just presenting some basic facts. That doesn't pass the sniff test, so to speak.
And as I understand it, you have sort of alleged that the Macrons are close to a network of pedophiles in France. And I think
it's not alleged. These people have come out and admitted or been tried. And that's a fact.
Well,
yeah.
Okay, their connection is not alleged to people who've been tried. Yeah. But I think you're sort of insinuating that the real scandal behind this is a kind of pedophilic elite in France. That's what you're
That's
getting.
correct. And that's by the way been a problem that's happened in Paris for a very long time. And that it's something. There have been too many pedophilia scandals in Paris, full stop. And you could go back to Sigmund Freud and the research that he was doing early on of what was going on in Paris. A lot of children that were being not just raped, but it was incestuous rape. And when you take a look at this story and the orbit of people around them who have fallen, whether it's Richard Duhamel, whose stepdaughter came out and said that he was molesting his son, and he admitted it. Richard Duhamel admitted it because he could not be tried for it because the statute of limitations had passed. Whether you look at even their lawyer, who is in Paris, Eric Dupond-Moretti, who was the Minister of Justice, he concerned himself with representing pedophiles, admitted incestuous pedophiles. Like there was a massive affair, the Manouche affair, and he coined the phrase, Eric Dupond-Moretti, that there was such a thing as happy incest. So it just doesn't help their story that there's so many people, including the guy who co-founded Yves Saint Laurent, who got behind Macron early on and said, I've known Brigitte and them as good friends, who also was involved in a pedophile scandal at the end of his life. It just doesn't help that there are so many people around them that are being accused of pedophilia, including designers of The Office. I'm calling it the Oval Office. I don't know what it's called in France, but picking out a carpet, the person that Brigitte worked with on designing The Office, his carpet, he then gets caught up in a scandal with boys coming forward and saying that they were molested by him, and he's still going through that trial right now. And of course, the biggest thing being that he chose for his presidential portrait, Emmanuel Macron chose to put the book of André Gide on his desk. André Gide is a self-admitted pedophile. I read André Gide's book at university. He admitted that he went down to Morocco and Algeria and molested Muslim boys. An odd choice for a president to choose that book, knowing that it would be controversial.
Well, I think you don't mind me saying, but like me, you're a Catholic. I'm not a convert, but you're a recent convert to Catholicism. And I know from my French Catholic family that there is this obsessive hatred in France of the French government and the secular French government and the French left, and this assumption that they are satanic somehow or satanically driven. Is that something you think you've latched onto?
Well, no, I was not aware of French politics. I got into this quite organically. I don't follow French politics. I don't speak French, so it actually took a lot for me to get into this story, and hours and hours and hours and months of work that I had to do to make sure that I fully comprehended it, so that I could present it to the English-speaking public without them being left going, "What are we really talking about?" And I got passionate about this because I'm a mother. I have 4 children, and the idea that there's an orbit of people who could commit crimes and then have the audacity to sue people for writing books or sue people that are talking about it. It offends me. It offends my senses as a Christian and as a mother. And I felt that it was very important for the world to kind of look and go, what's going on in France? And I'm quite shocked that the journalists weren't driven to get into this story, the pedophilia angle of it early on. And yes, we wouldn't have had this story without some of the mainstream journalists, but then they sort of backed away from it because they were fearful of having their entire lives ruined for going up against this powerful couple. And so, yeah, I got into it for all the right reasons. Definitely wasn't driven by some idea of a satanic panic happening in France, but there is something very sinister happening there without question. And it has been, like I said, happening for a very long time.
And to be clear, you did not buy Pizzagate. You didn't think that Hillary Clinton was running a secret pedophilic ring.
Yeah, I never did a minute of content on, I think they called it Pizzagate. Never did a minute of content towards Pizzagate. I didn't even look into the Pizzagate stuff. So again, it is an unusual story for me to take on. If I had this pattern of going, this person's definitely a man, or this person's definitely a man, then you would go, okay, maybe she's just a conspiracy theorist. I was very compelled towards the story, and I believe fully that Brigitte Macron was actually born a boy named Jean-Michel Trogneau.
And can I ask just what draws you to stories? Because you've just done an interview with Harvey Weinstein, very interesting interview with Harvey Weinstein. And essentially you're saying Harvey Weinstein, though a creep and a slob, was innocent of rape, and yet he is serving a very heavy sentence for it.
He is. And again, what I guess what drove me to that story, somebody had reached out, and I thought he was guilty of sin because the media coverage was just so extensive, and there were so many women that had come out and said something. But when I looked into the actual facts of the case, the evidence was just overwhelming. It's very difficult for me as a woman to believe somebody who's alleging that they were raped over the course of 5 years. And we're not talking about like this was an 18-year-old or a 17-year-old. These are 30-year-old women, and you could read a trove of emails that they wrote him. It looked like a very transactional relationship. They wanted tickets to Cannes. They wanted him to help them get auditions. We know what Hollywood is and always has been. This looked like I would describe it, I don't know if you guys use this term in the UK, as a sugar daddy relationship, a sugar baby relationship. They would meet up with him, and then he would book them on tickets to France or to the UK and put them up in fancy hotels. And that's immoral and it's wrong. And he should have had to step down, because if you are immoral, you shouldn't be leading a company. But he's sitting in prison and being accused of the crime of rape, right? I think it does a tremendous injustice to the disservice to the women who are actually raped to say, I wrote to my accuser for 5 years after my rape and said, love you, miss you. This is the circumstance of the Harvey Weinstein case. Even one woman who, after her quote unquote rape, wrote him and said, hey, my mom's in town. Do you want to meet my mom? Like, can I come over? Just not the traditional thing that you think people that are raped might do. And so it's important to tell that story because it can even happen to somebody who is powerful, right? The thing that draws me to any story is just, it has to be a kernel of truth. And also, I'm quite scared by the idea of mainstream corruption as well. The idea that we can believe the media after they put together a circus, and we're actually left with very little fact.
Well, and I think you hit on something that I suspect is true, that the Me Too scandal was very often, or lots of examples of Me Too scandals were companies or people trying to take people out professionally. It's a great way of taking someone out professionally is to accuse them of being a sexual predator. That's
correct. And it's been done for a very long time. And look, I obviously have a personal investment in this. I have 3 sons and I have a husband. And so I think it's incumbent upon women especially to speak up and to say something, because men can't. If a guy did a series saying Harvey Weinstein was not guilty, they would have gone, are you out of your mind? What's in your closet? What have you done to women in your past? And so I was happy to take that on. It's important to me. I think the Me Too movement is an absolute disaster. We shouldn't hashtag believe women. We shouldn't hashtag believe men. We should hashtag follow the facts, because both men and women lie.
Do you not worry a little bit, though, that, I mean, I've seen people call it transvestigation, that essentially, similar to Me Too, you can just say anyone is in the wrong sex. And if you say it enough, you create this doubt about them. And that, that is quite a hurtful and damaging thing to do to someone, whether or not Brigitte Macron's a terrible person, whether or not she's committed paedophilia by marrying her husband or having a relationship with her husband. It's quite a dangerous and risky thing you're doing.
And I wouldn't have taken the risk unless I believed it to be true, because at the end of the day, it would have made me look like a fool. If I had put together a 7-hour series and I said she's a woman because I think that she just doesn't look great in a skirt, who does that hurt? It hurts me. It doesn't hurt her. People that, if you are going to engage and your best evidence is she kind of looks like a man, that doesn't work. There are women that have more masculine looking features. There are men that have more feminine looking features. The reason why people were drawn to this series and it got millions of views wasn't because I was spewing nonsense. It was because I was presenting the story backed with concrete facts. And people watch the series and they come out and they go, yeah, I think that's a man. And again, the bar is so low. The bar is set so low here to disprove that theory. No person in their right mind, it's the common sense element here. You would not file a lawsuit in a foreign country before you would just release some photos of yourself for 30 years. Like, that seems like a lot easier of a thing to do. And then to come out and give a press conference and say, conspiracy theories are harmful. My family has been hurt by this. We are releasing these photos because we want to show to the world how easy it is for you to be convinced of something that simply is not true. You could turn it into a moment. They're not doing that. They're fighting in the courts, and they've hired a PR team in the United States. Not, again, getting on a plane and asking Trump to personally call me and shut me up. None of this is normal when you could debunk something so easily.
Yes, the Donald Trump story, I should have mentioned that earlier, that he lent on you himself to stop talking about the Brigitte Macron story.
Yeah, Emmanuel Macron flew to the White House back in February, flew to DC back in February, ostensibly to discuss Russia and Ukraine on the very day that he was there, which leads me to believe that this wasn't a small part of the conversation, right? On the very day that he was there, I was contacted by the White House and told that essentially Emmanuel Macron took Trump to the side and wants me to stop talking about Brigitte. And the person who relayed this to me before Trump called me the next day said that it was a contingency on the Ukraine-Russia conversation, which is ridiculous. I mean, he should be impeached. It should be absolutely impeached if that contingency is true. When Trump called me the next day, he basically said he was very surprised, but Emmanuel Macron took him aside and basically asked if he could get me to stop talking about Brigitte. And I'm going, this is totally wacky. This is just totally bizarre. Brigitte could get everyone to stop talking about Brigitte by just releasing the photos. And I said to him that I would not speak about Brigitte for a few months while they were I think he was looking for a signature on some document pertaining to the EU. But then certainly, of course, because speech is important and there's nothing more American than free speech, I would speak about it months later, which is exactly what I did.
We should talk about Trump a bit, actually, because your sort of history with Trump is quite interesting. You were a keen supporter. He was a fan of you. He appreciated you and recognized that you were an powerful, important media voice. And then it seems you've completely fallen out, and largely over Gaza. Am I correct in saying that?
You are correct in saying that. There's just certain things that you can't look away from. And what's happening in Gaza, to me, it's just a moment. Are you a human or are you not a human? And I have just been, and also the Epstein fumble as well, the gaslighting of the Epstein case, running on that, saying, we all understand that there is real power and there's real corruption. And then to effectively gaslight your supporters and say, why are we still talking about Jeffrey Epstein? What do you mean, why aren't we still talking about Jeffrey Epstein? If there's been a blackmail ring and politicians are supporting things because they have been blackmailed, we need to know that's very important. So I've been very disappointed in him.
Why do you think he did fumble the Epstein story? I mean, do you buy this, what the Wall Street Journal's reporting, that he's in the files, that he sent this bawdy birthday card to Jeffrey Epstein?
I don't buy the birthday card because Trump immediately came out and said this is not true and sued. But it is interesting that regarding him being in the files, when that was reported, it might have been Reuters who reported that, they said that he was surprised in May when Pam Bondi sat down for a meeting and said, you're actually in these files. he never debunked that. He never said that that report was not true. And it makes the most sense given the timeline of how quickly he flipped from the Epstein story. Like February, they're talking about it. March, they're talking about it. Then all of a sudden in May, he's going, why are we still talking about Epstein? So something shifted. And I think that that likely makes sense. Now, do I believe that Donald Trump was on Epstein Island? No. Do we know that he partied with Epstein in his youth? Yes, we know that. Trump has never been a drinker. He's never done drugs. But in looking into this story, Trump did run Miss Universe for a very long time, and we know that Epstein's interests. He was always involved in casting women through these companies that he was trafficking. I think it's Jean-Luc Brunel was running a modeling agency that he was apparently trafficking women through. It might be that he got caught up, and again, I'm totally surmising here. There's no evidence of this. I want to be clear. And I'm just thinking logically, he could have accidentally gotten caught up in something and not recognized it. The bigger point is that he could have come to his supporters and said, look, I'm very surprised to hear this. I have nothing to do with anything that happened on that island. He could have gotten ahead of it. When you choose to gaslight the public, you have become exactly what you knew that we hated when we sent you into DC. More dishonest politicians assuming that they are smarter than the people that they govern over. And they're not. They simply aren't.
Well, I mean, I take your point about gaslighting, but I have to say, having watched your show today, I felt like I was taking crazy pills because it is, whatever the truth of the matter, it is a maddening story, the Brigitte Macron story, is it not? Do you ever feel that you've maybe taken crazy pills and you've become a conspiracy theorist?
On the Brigitte Macron stuff, absolutely not. If I feel like I've ever taken crazy pills, it's like, I'm on no sleep. I've got an infant and I have to get up and go to work. That's the only time where I'm like, how am I alive? But the Brigitte Macron story is one of the most fascinating stories ever. And in a sane world, I would be given a Pulitzer. I would be given a Pulitzer for this story, for bringing this to the world. And I think I'm just the right person to take this on. I think, I've built up trust with my audience, and they just know that I just wouldn't dabble in this for just no reason. It's so silly. Like I said, you only do yourself a disservice when you lie. Exactly what I'm saying about Trump. You only do yourself a disservice. And I think in the end, the truth always wins. And that may take time to get there, but we are going to get there with Brigitte. And gratefully, they sort of lit a match on dynamite here by filing a lawsuit against me, because the way the American courts work is you're going to have to now answer those questions that we were just trying to get you to answer before we ran the first episode. So I don't understand what this entire song and dance is even about.
On Gaza, Candace, I mean, I think a lot of people, probably most of the world now, agrees with your position that what Israel is doing is morally unacceptable, abhorrent, etc. But I think there's a lot of suspicion of you that you have gone from that into full-on Jew hatred. How do you respond to that allegation of anti-Semitism?
Well, first and foremost, I do feel somewhat vindicated, because initially when the press began referring to me as an anti-Semite and taking things that I had said out of context, it was only because I had taken an earlier position on Gaza. Everyone got there now. I was there 2 years ago. And so I went through the coals. And that's why I say it's so important to commit yourself to the truth, even when there's a peer pressure campaign to say the other thing, even when you're being called an anti-Semite. Now you're seeing Jews are being called anti-Semitic. People that live in Israel are being called anti-Semitic and being called self-hating Jews, who are saying what my government is doing is they are committing a genocide. I was early to that party, like I'm early to the Brigitte Macron party. Of course, it is such a nonsense. Anybody who cared to do any due diligence into my life, it's a nonsense to say that I have hatred for Jews. I worked for Prager University. It is a literal Zionist enterprise that is run by an IDF intelligence, Marissa Straight. I then worked for the Daily Wire, which is run by Ben Shapiro. Prior to that, I worked in private equity for two Jews in New York for 4 years. And I almost married a Jew, actually, while I was in New York. And so they're obviously not doing that because they believe it. Like I said, any incursion into my past and my history would debunk this. I grew up in a remarkably Jewish town just outside of New York City. But I am not, I'm the same girl that stood up to Black Lives Matter, right? I don't care about your identity. I know when people are calling people racist because they are trying to stop the conversation. It was very tough when I said I don't support Black Lives Matter as a Black person. You're a self-hating Black. I am definitely sharpened. I know exactly what's happening when you start using your identity as a shield, and it just doesn't work with me. What's happening in Gaza is atrocious.
Well, you married a self-hating Brit instead, which is which is sorry, not self-hating. What am I saying? Sorry, I meant to say you married a Brit. Sorry, let me start that again. I don't know whether your husband's self-hating. I'm self-hating. Okay, let me start again.
I didn't know where we were going with that.
Sorry.
You're like, you married an American, you hate yourself. Meghan Markle did that.
Sorry.
That's what happened.
Let me start that again. I'm very sorry, Candace. I lost my train of thought.
This is very funny.
I'll say it again.
You should keep it. That's hilarious.
Well, you married a Brit, which, as a self-hating Brit, I think is sort of almost quite striking. Anyway, never mind. Let's move on. I wanted to just briefly ask you, and I will let you go after this, about an interview you did with Nick Fuentes, because Nick Fuentes is a figure who creates a lot of interest on the internet, even though what he says is considered totally beyond the pale by a lot of mainstream society and so on. You had him onto your show and you had quite a cantankerous interview. Can you just tell us a little bit about what happened there?
It's funny because I didn't really consider the interview to be cantankerous. I think his reaction to the interview made the internet think that it was going to be cantankerous. He was very friendly when he was here at my house. We told him we were going to cut a controversial trailer. He laughed. Everything was fine. And then 10 days later, he completely flipped when we released it. And so I had to think about why he did that, why he was so dishonest, pretending that we set him up when we were laughing about the trailer that we were going to cut. And then he pretends, he's so fragile. And if he thought that that was a testy interview, he just would not make it in politics. I've had testy interviews. I've had people take clips of me out of context and had to really defend myself. That was me just trying to get to the root of who this person was and asking him, perhaps wrongly, people have said that you hate Jews. He says he doesn't hate Jews. Okay, fine. I'll accept that at face value. But then can you explain to me why you hate Dave Smith? If it's just an Israel thing, Dave Smith is Jewish, but he hates Israel. I don't think he provided an adequate answer for that. And so maybe he afterwards said he changed his mind about the interview 10 days later. I think that's a bit of a nonsense. Look, my estimation of Nick is that he is comfortable where he doesn't have to defend his ideas. You get what I mean? And that is why he's kind of jumped into this sort of victim complex where having a conversation with people and disagreeing with them, like I don't agree with his perspectives, makes him angry. I mean, the anger that he showed after, you would have thought that I stabbed him in the back. And that's just not the experience that we had here. And we would have had him back on the show. But I'm not going to put my team through that. You pretend everything's fine and then say you magically change your mind. And then you put on, to me, it looked like it was just theater. He was acting at a certain point, shut up, woman. And I tried to think afterwards about what it is that offended him so much, because then he said that I was stuck up and, it was trying to mom him. I think he was expecting a response. So if you sit across from a Black woman, you say, I'm a racist. You're doing that to troll a response. And I didn't give him the response that he was looking for because I'm not interested in that. If you want to jump on the internet and say the N-word and you want to call, I hate Black people, that might be very funny and interesting for people that are young boys. I know kids on video games, they have the chats and they say the N-word 1,000 times. It's just not interesting to me. It's not compelling to me. And so what he took as perhaps conceit was generally just intellectual boredom. If you genuinely have something to say about how white people are being attacked, I can get there, or having that, but saying I want my children to look like me. What do you think about that? It feels like you're trolling for an emotional response. And I'm just not that emotional. You have every right. If you don't want to date or marry a Black person, that's on you. If you want to say the N-word on the internet, have fun. It just doesn't insult me, truly.
Did you know about Nick Fuentes? Did you find out about Nick Fuentes because of Kanye West? Because I know that Kanye West once tweeted about you, and that blew up in a big way. And then Nick Fuentes worked on Kanye West's presidential campaign, I think, at one point.
Yeah, he was kicked off of Twitter and canceled, and I became aware of Nick Fuentes because people were actually creating a conspiracy theory about me, saying that when I said that I didn't support what was happening in Israel, that I was working behind the scenes with Nick Fuentes and the Groypers, because I guess on Nick's show, he was sharing a lot of clips of me and saying that she's taking a stance on something because we hold the same opinion about Bibi Netanyahu. That's without question. And so they wrongly attributed him to me. But then when Elon Musk allowed him back onto X, I saw clips of him. And when he's not being a raging, angry, I think he acts a bit like a teenager. He does, when he gets just into foreign, when he's talking about foreign policy, he's quite interesting. And that was his interest. If you saw when he recounted his story, he was on Model UN in high school. He was very interested in foreign affairs. And you can see that. But then I think that he feels like he has to respond to the internet, and he thinks it's really cool to, say the N-word or call a woman a bitch. And genuinely, I'm not interested. It doesn't offend me. I'm not interested. I don't grow from it. I look, I'm 36 years old. Maybe that's why I'm not like, haha, that's so cool. It's so funny. Yeah, he said the thing you're not allowed to say. It's like, okay, if he stuck to just foreign policy analysis and gave up that bit of theater where he pretends like he's always being victimized, and I thought that maybe he was ready for that, to make that transition from the 18-year-old that was rejected to kind of being like, look, I've said some stupid stuff, and I now kind of want to enter in seriously and talk about foreign policy. But I don't believe that's the case. I think he's comfortable where he is, which is like screaming and pretending that he's constantly being victimized by conversation.
Candace, we'll end it there. But thank you very much indeed for coming on to the Americano Show.
Thank you so much for having me.